So we've currently got class 31, number 31327 in the works department at the moment, and we're currently replacing the old failed Parkside control equipment with a brand new Mtronics traction and sound system, along with some other repairs to the locomotive. Hi there, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the class 31 upgrade and refurbishment. In this episode I'm hoping to put all the speaker business inside the speaker box and fit the grills and get this box painted black, ready for installing in the loco. And I'm also going to have a look at these two bogies that the locomotive actually runs on. There's a fault on this one in that we've got a loose wheel, as we know about from previous, and that one I've just discovered that there's a loose wire onto one of the motors, so I'm going to have a word with a friend of mine about what we can do about that, so we can perhaps have a further update on that a little bit later. So I'm going to start off with the speaker box for now, and then we'll move on to these. So if you come down a bit closer, we'll have a look at this speaker box and see what we're doing. So here we are with the speaker box then, and this is a strange arrangement, people might think, but this is hopefully a get out of jail card, because embarrassingly I made another mistake where you should measure twice and cut once. So I couldn't find my pencil when I wanted it, so I scribed it through with a screwdriver, if you remember, to locate the position for drilling this hole. And then, because I didn't have my glasses with me either, and this hadn't scribed very well, I missed my mark completely, because later on I thought about it and I thought I'll just go back and recheck that before I go any further. So I went back and checked, and this is actually the centre line of the hole now, if I'm not mistaken. So rather than just drill another hole here and have two holes like a figure of 8 and people think he obviously made a mistake, I'm trying to cover that fact up by using this large cutter. And again, I've undone the little grub screw that's in here, and I've pulled the mandrel out of the arbor, such that now I can poke that through like we did before with the base where we were drilling a hole. And now hopefully this mandrel can locate in the same hole that we had previously in that piece of steel. So I'm hoping that will go in there into the hole in there now. But if I go carefully with my drill, I should be able to make a reasonable large hole that will hide the fact that I needed two holes, but it will just mean that I have a large hole there, which people could think, well, he just drilled a large hole, end of story, rather than he's covering his own back. But I thought if I bring this to your attention, then you'll know to not improvise perhaps, but go and find the right tool for the right job. Measure twice, cut once. More haste, less speed. So just bear that in mind. So I'm going to try and drill that now and see how we go. So this is just the piece of steel clamped onto the bottom face of this box with a G-clamp, and we've now got a hole in the piece of metal there. So I'm going to put this into that hole, and hopefully I will manage, going very carefully, to end up with a round hole that covers the perimeter of this hole and yet gives me plenty of space around the pin that will be around there. I should still have a lot of play around that pin, all being well. So let's see how that pans out anyway. It's only a piece of wood at the end of the day that can be changed. But I thought if I own up to my foolishness and mistake, somebody else might avoid the same issue. If you haven't got the right tool, go and try and find the right tool for the right job. Let's see how I go with this. Make sure that's clamped up good and proper. Don't want any more foolishness. Clamp that securely with my feet. Enter the hole. Let's see how we go. We can always abandon the job if we make a mess. So far so good. So now I've drilled this circle here, I quite possibly don't need the mandrel anymore. If I go carefully, I should be able to stay in that groove, because I'm only cutting through the wood. So I'll just remove the mandrel. And these hole saws, because of the diameter of them, they can't just run on the thread that's in the middle. It's too much torque, I think. So they have these daggers that come down into the back of the cutter. So the central screw keeps the cutter in relation to the centre of the drilling machine, and then the dogs either side of that central pivot that keep that going in a proper circle rather than wandering about. It's the dogs that actually drive this. So there are the dogs. That's on a sliding collar, and they're just locating these two drive holes here within the base of the cutter blade itself. So that screws onto there like that, and then it's got its centre of revolution, if you like, revolving, and then we just drop these pins into the holes, and that should be it. So now I'll try that without the mandrel, and we can see that the mandrel's got a flat on it, and that's what the grub screw in here lands on. It lands on that flat edge there, such that it can drive this drill round. But I found in the past, once you've got the perimeter sorted out, if you go carefully, you can actually use that perimeter as your guide instead of the mandrel down the hole, which keeping it in place. So let's see how we go with that idea. can do, I can remove the seal completely now, in theory. And then just go through with the hole saw through the timber. There we are. So there we are, not so bad. That's quite hot now, that cutter blade, so I'll leave that to cool before I take that wood out. But there we are, we haven't done too badly. We still have a round hole. And for anybody in the future, they might think he just wanted a large hole rather than he's had to make 2 holes because he made a mistake. So hopefully that hole will be big enough now and in the right place. If it's not, I'm not showing you a third one. So I'll go and get Henry. So Henry's here now, bless him. In fact, I'll just run a bit of sandpaper around the inside of that hole where it's got a slight breaking away. Here I go again, breaking my own rules. Instead of finding some sandpaper, I've just found some emery cloth because it was nearer. What have I just said about using the right tool for the right job? So now, while this front plate's off to give me access to get that steel in and the clamp, I can now fasten the speaker to what's going to be the back side of this timber, and then that will go back in that way. Then I've got to be very careful though, because this is only card, and if that gets damaged it won't make the correct sound, so it's very important that that doesn't get damaged at all. Looks like the wind's getting up a little. I'll go and catch that in a moment. Never do tomorrow what you can do today. I'll go and fetch it now. There we go, that's good. All under control again now. So I mounted this speaker on the outside earlier. Decided to put it inside, which is where it really should be, I think. It gives it better protection, etc, etc, and the disc here will cover all the better. So I'm just picking up on the through drilled holes that I made when I fastened it to the outside. This is a huge magnet in here, so things will be attracted to it, so just be aware of that with a speaker, that they are a huge magnet. There we are. You can see it's a magnet. So just be aware of that when if you're working near it with tools, etc. So if you remember previously, I had this speaker fitting on this side of the face of the box. I drilled that big enough to fit the whole speaker through, such that I could mount it to this face if I wanted to. But I've decided to put the speaker inside, which is where it should probably be in actual fact. And then this speaker grill will cover it all the better. So what I've actually done, I've mounted the speaker now on the back side of the timber, just with the 4 screws, and I'm just going to drill a hole in the box big enough for this cable to go through. Hopefully if you can see that, you can see that there's space all around the drill. If I put the cable there, we can see space either side of the cable. We can see the drill, so that drill should be big enough for this cable to come through the side of the box. And I'm doing it through the side of the box at the bottom here, but in the side facing forward, which is where the control box is going to be in the wiring. It's going to be on this face here. So I'm going to arrange that hole so it doesn't coincide with this screw that's going through into this white timber, and the drill will come through the white timber through there. It won't clash with the drill will go down through there, but it won't clash with this screw that's in there. I've moved the hole position far enough away to avoid that. And then I can put that back on there. But what I need to do first then is paint the box and the front face before putting this ring on, etc. So I'll drill that hole now, ready for that, and reposition this on the front. I'll take it apart again, paint the box, and then we'll come back and I'll just put that front face on. I'll just put this front face on then. I don't think you need to see me paint a box really. So the next time you see this box now, this front face will be fastened onto it. And again, before I took this front face off, what I actually did, I marked it up like I have done there with that side of this box. I've marked it up so it mates up with a particular mark on the box. There it is, that's the mark on the box that a mark on there locates up to, and then I know which way is square effectively. If the box is slightly out of square, I know that's the face that fits that better. So this is the front bogie then that's got the loose wheel. This is the loose wheel on this side here. So I'm going to tip that over, and I'll get an Allen key in this bolt here. Hopefully you can just make that out there. That wants an Allen key in it, so I'll put an Allen key in there and take that bolt out and remove the 2 screws at the bottom here. Remove these 2 screws here, and down on this other side here I'll remove these 2. Then hopefully the whole of that wheel arrangement can drop out of that bogie, and we'll have a look at it then. So that's what I'm going to do. So hopefully now you can see that I've used the Allen key, and I've removed this screw here, and that's now allowed the motor unit to slide down. So if I remove these 2 screws up here and there, the whole of these axle boxes should come out from these horns, as they call them. Should just slide down towards the bottom of the picture, and away. So I've got this wheel set removed now, and I can see that the shiny part on the top of this axle box here rubs against this suspension arrangement here. So that side there has made this top side shiny, etc. And likewise that's the top of the other, and that one goes in that way, and they just slide up and down. So they want oiling on occasion, and the end of the axle just goes into that box there, into that hole, and that is it. That's the bearing. There's no actual ball bearings or anything. It's just a metal on metal, or metal on brass, or phosphor bronze, whichever it's made of. It looks to be made of steel. No, I'm wrong. There is a tiny bearing in there. I was thinking it was just steel, but I can actually see the bearing. Can you see the roller tape, the roller bearings there? Like pins, aren't they? So I'll have to be careful that that doesn't get dislodged. And I suppose that is removed. If we took these 4 screws off, we'd probably get to remove that bearing from this metal housing that it's in. So I'm keeping all of these components as per where they belong. Like that one goes up and down in this side, and I'm keeping the other side respective to this top side here, which is where they want to be. You're always better putting them back in exactly the same place as they were. This one's also got a bearing in it. I can see the bearing, the little rollers down the board of that hole. And as I mentioned previously, I thought I could see some kind of a little grub screw, which I can, and I've got an Allen key for that grub screw there, and that grub screw there actually goes down, and if I remove this wheel somewhat, we can see in the axle there's a hole. So the grub screw should tighten down into that hole. But what's happened is the grub screw has wound itself out, and now the wheel is just spinning on the axle. So all I need to do is put this wheel back on its axle, tighten that grub screw in, maybe with some Loctite on it, such that it won't unscrew itself again. So I'll have to clean this wheel setup and then reassemble it with some Loctite in there. So that's what I'm going to do. That's how it works anyway. So I'm going to clean this wheel setup, clean this axle up, etc. And then I'll clean that little lot up and put some Loctite on there when I screw it back in, such that it won't unwind again, because centrifugal force is always going to try to bring that out of the hole and unscrew itself, so it will come out again eventually. So that's what I'm going to do. And the 2 keeps, which the keep and the screws, I'm keeping the keep and the screws all in line. I'm going to put them back on now, so I know which area they came from, so they can never be mixed up. So I'll put them back on next. I don't want to lose any of the parts. Try and keep them all in the order they came off. So I made a return visit to my friend's house and got this soldering of this motor done. What we had to do, we had to put new cable on because the original cables that were on were oxidised and had gone black along the core length and weren't soldering very well. But in any event, the cable originally went down inside a thimble like that and was soldered inside the thimble, but we didn't fancy putting that much heat onto the motor, etc., with the soldering iron, and we found it difficult to get the cable back inside the hole. We didn't want to melt things down such that that would slide in. So what we did, we laid the cable alongside the thimble that was sticking out of the motor here. We laid the cable alongside it and soldered the cable to the side of the thimble instead of it going inside the thimble like that. We just soldered it to the side of the thimble. And what I should have done really would have been to bend the cable like that and then solder that to the side. But in actual fact I forgot to do that, so we soldered them like that to the side, and then once we'd soldered it, then I had to bend the cable at almost 90 degrees to keep the cable away from the side frame here. And I'm going to put a tie wrap on these two here to hold them together, to stop them rubbing on this side frame as the motor might flex and move about. So I've put the motor back in temporarily, but it's going to have to come out again, and to remove this cogwheel. I want to remove this cogwheel ideally, so we'll have a look at one of them very shortly. So I used some new cable onto the motor, and I may well put some new cable onto the existing cable on the other motors, because I don't actually think I'll bother replacing the cable right to the thimble which are on the motors, because I don't want to damage the motors or make a mess of this soldering job. If a thing ain't bust, don't fix it perhaps. So I thought where these wires might be cracked or broken like that, it's got a crack in it there, if I can work it back and put a joint in the cable somewhere with a crimped joint and replace it with this new flexible cable that I've got, then these will then join onto some bigger cables that will go back to the circuit breakers. But what we did, once we got the motor connected up, we then connected it to the battery via this fuse holder here. It's one of those car fuse holders. So I've got some of these off eBay, and I think I'll put some of these here and there in the wiring harness of the locomotive when we start to wire it. But these cables are going to be going to a larger cable. These are 2.5, and I'm going to put them onto some 6mm, and that will keep the voltage drop down and allow larger currents to flow if we need it. But this cable should allow 30 amps to flow in it, because it's a tri-rated cable that I've got here. So that's what we did, and we used a 100-watt thermostatically controlled soldering iron to do this job, so we could get heat quickly into the job without heat build up working down the cable and melting the insulation as it was going. It was quick on with the soldering iron and on with the solder, because using my own soldering irons, which were smaller wattage, I would have had to hold it there longer until this got hot enough to be accepting the solder, etc., by which time heat transfer would come down here and start to melt the insulation. So using the bigger soldering iron, the 100 watt on, and then straight on with the solder, and then on heat up the thimble, and then on with the cable again. And the reason I didn't film any was because one of us was holding the cable nice and steady till the solder set, whilst the other one was doing the job, so I didn't actually get to film any, unfortunately. But that motor's back in now, but it will be coming out again, as I say, because ideally I want to replace this cogwheel here. And if we look at this other motor that I've got here, we'll see that I've removed the cogwheel and the axle. So the axle goes through this hollow tube which is part of this framework along the motor, which is why I didn't want to damage any of the motors, because I would have to get 4 motors all the same and then adapt the chassis to fit any new motors if anything happened to these particular motors. So I'm fighting shy of replacing any more of these cables, because I don't want to lose connection to the motor itself or damage the connection to the motor itself. And the way this thing works, this is like just a steel hollow tube attached to this framework of the motor, and it's got like phosphor bronze bushes on each end of the hollow tube, and they're the bushes that the axle runs in. And then the axle goes in and it meshes with this motor, with this cogwheel on the motor there. But some of these cogwheels here, they're only nylon plastic type things. Some of these have got teeth broken off them, so I need to replace these. And as best as I could count, there are 112 teeth around the perimeter of this wheel, and this wheel is 91 millimeters across in diameter, and it's 6 millimeter. I'm not sure whether you can see it written on there. 6 millimeter in thickness. So it's 6 millimeters across here, and I've measured it with the vernier gauge, and it's about 91 millimeters across. So it's about 91 millimeters across the diameter of this nylon wheel. And I used a pen. I would have been better with some kind of a indelible ink type pen, like a marker pen with a very fine point on it. I've just marked up on a particular tooth, and then I put a thin screwdriver into the teeth and counted the number of clicks as I went over the teeth. And when I'd gone round a full 10 teeth, I then marked up another line indicating another tooth, which is 10 between each one of them. So then I measured tens, 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 and I ended up with a couple there spare. So it was 112 in total. So now I need to try and get some of these cogwheels with 112 teeth on. It wouldn't really matter as long as it's somewhere near 112. But I guess the fact of the matter is they all the 4 which I need to get, all the 4 will need to be the same number of teeth, so that all the wheels are supposedly driving at the same rate if these motors are all running at the same revs per minute, which they should be, because these motors will all be matched to each other. So that's the next step. I need to remove these nylon wheels now and get these replaced. And what we were saying before about the wheel, so I'm not sure if you can make this out. Let's have a look. In the bore of the wheel there, you should see the grub screw coming out. There's the grub screw coming out into the bore of the wheel. And that grub screw locates in a little hole there in the axle, and the axle has actually been machined with a flat on it. It's actually got a small flat machined across it, such that the grub screw in the wheel can locate on that flat spot, and they should drive round together then at the same revolution. This wheel seems to be glued on or pressed on, and the other wheel that hasn't got the disc on it, the wheel that hasn't got this nylon wheel attached to it, this wheel is a sliding fit on the axle and then located truly in place by the grub screw, which we can just see there. That's what actually locks the wheel onto the axle. Now on this particular one, when I decided to remove this one, I found that when I took the grub screw out, I still couldn't get the wheel off, and I couldn't find my wheel removing clamp that would have gone onto the back face of the wheel with a screw in the middle that would push on the axle and draw the wheel off, a gear puller as you might call it. I couldn't find my gear puller, so what I did, I tipped the motor over like that, and stood it on a piece of wood with the wheel on. So the wheel was on like that. So I stood the end of the axle on a block of wood like that, such that the axle itself wouldn't drift anywhere, and then with a soft face hammer I just tap the wheel until it came off. And I found then what was actually holding the wheel on was the fact that this piece had become burred. It had burrs on it. So I got a small file and filed the burrs off once I'd got the wheel off. Got rid of the burrs, and so now the wheel goes back on nicely. So I'm going to replace this, and then I can reassemble these. So that's the next task, to replace these damaged cogwheels with all a similar kind of cogwheel. But we'll do that in another video. This is the box I got with the heat shrinking that went over these terminals here, and I'm going to put some of this heat shrink over all these other motor terminals, etc. And if there's any damaged cables, I'll put some over the damaged cable and then heat it up, and it will shrink down over the cable and insulate the cable in case it were to touch on anything. So that's heat shrink. And then I'll try a hairdryer on it just to heat it up, and hopefully it will shrink down onto these cables. But we'll have a look at that when we get down to it in another video.